What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we are checking out the new 2024 Motorola Moto G Stylus. Now, for longtime viewers of the channel, you guys know I've had a love-hate relationship with this phone. A number of years ago, the Moto G Stylus was an incredibly popular and unique sub-$400 smartphone that tons of people scooped up as a cheeky alternative to the $1,000 Samsung Ultras and Notes, the only other smartphones that offered stylus support. In the last couple release cycles of this phone, however, Motorola divided the G Stylus into a 5G phone and a cheaper non-5G phone, and both options were bad in their own ways, offering a little improvement over the previous year, poor specs, and giving fans of the phone no real reason to upgrade. This year, I'm ecstatic to say that the 2024 Moto G Stylus isn't just improved, it's practically a brand new device from top to bottom, with a fresh design, long-awaited upgrades across the board, and this seriously might just be the best Moto device Motorola has ever released. It's not perfect, Motorola still left me a couple of things to complain about, but if you've had any of the previous Moto G Styluses, or any other Moto device in general, I truly think this is the one we've all been waiting to upgrade to. So I'm going to fill you in on everything you need to know about this new phone, of course, but first things first, let's just quickly unbox it, and then I'll get into all the important details. Slicing into the package and sliding off the lid, the first thing you're presented with is the phone itself, all wrapped up nicely. Underneath that is seemingly an unnecessary cardboard divider that I thought maybe had something hidden inside it, but nope, totally empty and definitely a waste of trees. Inside the plastic-free and soy ink stamped chunk of cardboard, you'll find your accessories, another tree's worth of paperwork, a USB-C charging cable, and a SIM ejector tool. And I'll continue to roast Motorola's packaging only because A, they keep improving the charging speeds on their phones, which is great, but don't give you a charging brick to utilize that, and B, there is nothing sustainable about all this cardboard and paper. Anyway, here's the new 2024 G Stylus once again. Mine is in the caramel latte colorway. Yes, that's seriously the color. You can also snag it in Scarlet Wave, which is a deep red. And as it boots up with this fun new splash screen, let me just quickly go over pricing. This phone is available unlocked directly from Motorola and from third-party retailers like Amazon for $399. That's the full retail price, but most of you know that Moto devices tend to almost never be sold at their full retail price, so I'm sure you'll see this phone discounted at some point soon. And if you browse the major carriers and prepaid brands right now, you'll see this phone offered at varying prices with a service contract. Visible has it listed for $260, it's $199 via Straight Talk Wireless, Consumer Cellular and US Mobile offer it, and it'll continue to be widely available here in the US. So a deal is out there to be found. Please don't pay full retail for this thing if you don't want to. Also, one other note during setup, Motorola ditched the page that allowed you to uncheck some of their pre-installed bloatware apps. So when you finally jump into this phone, you're gonna have crap like Booking.com and their awful gaming and shopping spam folder things all clunkily installing in the background, which is mildly annoying. So fans of the Moto G Stylus series will notice right away that this new one has been totally redesigned, and its fit and finish are in line with what we've seen on the other new 2024 Moto G devices. At 6.7 inches corner to corner, this is back to being one of the biggest phones you can buy, and it's just a bit bigger than last year. It also has a much better screen-to-body ratio, greater than 88%, thanks to those streamlined black borders that frame the display and slightly more subtle bottom chin. From the front, this almost looks like a premium, modern, high-end device, and I'm really happy with the design improvements. I think most people will also be happy with that giant screen, and while the tall aspect ratio is a stretch once again, there's a lot of value in getting such a massive screen. Around back, this phone gets the eco leather treatment, just like the Moto G 5G and Moto G Power this year. It's a soft, supple, and semi-premium feeling leather-like back that's honestly very unique. The sides and frame of the phone are this brushed aluminum looking finish that feel thick, heavy, and seem to me like it's all metal with a polished chamfered detail. In the hand, this phone feels heavy and sturdy, but with the flat sides, thin profile, and smoothed out camera bump, keeps everything streamlined. And this color, well, I wasn't really in love with it at first, but it's sort of grown on me, especially if I think about it more like a soft gold. The only other thing to note build-wise is this still has Motorola's water repellent classification, which isn't exactly an IP certification, but it should survive an accidental splash. Taking a look around, on the left side you'll find your physical SIM card tray with micro SD card support. Now some of the carriers are selling this phone in the 128GB configuration, but factory unlocked you'll get 256GB of storage. Either way though, you can obviously pop in a 1TB SD card and bump that storage way up for cheap. Like I said earlier, you should also get rid of some of the pre-installed apps you know you aren't going to use, and you'll reclaim at least another couple of gigs of storage. On the right side, familiar volume and power buttons. Your fingerprint sensor is now underneath the display, another new change for this phone. It's definitely not the fastest in-display fingerprint sensor by any means. It really requires you to touch and hold, but an interesting change nonetheless, and if you enable face unlock as well, that'll definitely help you get into the phone quickly. There's nothing really at the top. On the bottom, you have a headphone jack still, the USB-C charging port, the bottom speaker, and then the built-in stylus, of course, sort of the whole point of this phone. There's a secondary loudspeaker within the earpiece above the selfie camera, and around back, a dual lens camera setup. So let's talk about that stylus, since that's the whole reason this phone exists. At the bottom right there, you'll poke at and pop out the built-in stylus, which should be very familiar to anyone who's used this, a Samsung Note, an Ultra, or even like an LG Stylo from back in the day. The physical stylus itself on this year's Moto is quite nice. All metal, very thick, there's a good weight to it. I wish the tiny mesh tip was a little sharper, but overall this is a solid feeling stylus to hold. When you eject the stylus from the phone is going to prompt you with a stylus-specific shortcut menu with apps that are, well, stylus-centric by default. You can customize this shortcut menu to have any app you want, including Google's Keep Notes, for example, any other stylus writing or note-taking apps you prefer to use, or any other third-party app in general you just want quick access to. You can add, delete, or rearrange this menu to your heart's desire. As far as the Moto-specific stylus apps, there doesn't appear to be anything new or different here. The apps have certainly improved over the years, but I don't know of any new apps or anything unique or specific to this phone. So if you're used to the previous Moto stylus apps and shortcuts, like the default note taker, the handwriting calculator, the GIF maker, the screenshot editor, that's all still here. Functionality-wise, you can of course use the stylus just like your finger to tap, touch, swipe, and scroll your way through the phone, but more than likely you'll be using the stylus to either get a more precise touch point to certain small things on screen, or probably to write, jot notes, draw pictures, mark up documents, screenshots, stuff like that. The stylus itself still isn't directly connected to the phone in any way. There's still no wireless or Bluetooth connection like Samsung's Ultra or a tablet pen. The stylus is still just a glorified metal stick. But thanks to a new and improved display, which I'll talk about in a second, the lag and latency this year feels quite reduced. You don't have nearly the gap you used to between the pen tip and the line on the screen. The writing and drawing experience to me feels smoother, faster, more accurate, and more responsive. The G Stylus's stylus experience is still rudimentary. There's nothing particularly smart about it, and it's still not the full experience you'd get from a Samsung or like an Apple Pencil, but this is still the only other smartphone that offers this thing, and I do think the unique stylus experience and handful of stylus apps are going to attract a good chunk of people who will still utilize and enjoy such a feature. So in my opinion, the biggest upgrade to this year's G Stylus overall is the display. And after years and years of complaining about this, Motorola finally listened. At least they did in my mind. The 6.7-inch screen is now a OLED panel. Still the full HD 2400 by 1080 resolution, packing in a decent 395 pixels per inch on this big screen, and still offering a 120Hz high refresh rate option. This is it. This is the 3 for 3 best all-around screen spec you could want on a phone in this price range. And if you need one reason to consider this phone this year, it's the screen. And I swear to you, I've literally never said that about any Motorola device before. The OLED panel is not quite flagship caliber, but it's the bold, colorful, and bright viewing experience that's long been left off the Moto devices of yesteryear. At 1200 nits of peak brightness, it's also the first Moto device that doesn't have debilitating glare from a dim screen, and the vibrant colors make this an obvious upgrade for anyone who's been suffering from previous LCD screens. At this size, the 1080 1080 resolution means it's plenty sharp, something I couldn't always say about Moto devices. Seriously. And with the 120Hz option enabled, something you should absolutely do in settings since it's not on by default, the phone feels fast and responsive to the touch. Visually, it looks smooth and fluid, and I also think this helps improve the stylus experience too with overall responsiveness. I'm so relieved that this phone has the screen it deserves. And like I said, if you wanted one reason to finally upgrade or to pick this Moto device over the rest of the 2024 lineup this year, this is it right here. It's the best display ever on a G stylus, and it's the best within the rest of the Moto Gs for 2024. As far as the out loud listening experience, Motorola kept the dual speaker setup, which is great. You've got one at the bottom, the secondary one up top, and even at max volume, this phone sounds pretty good and clear enough. As far as the internal specs and overall performance, well, here's the big but with this phone. I expected Motorola would have to make a sacrifice or two, and they decided to keep the same Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor from last year's phone in this new one. They did bump up the RAM though, 8GB here, whether you have the smaller storage option or the bigger storage option, so that's great, and that I actually think will yield some performance improvements in daily usage, considering that last year Motorola gave you 4GB of RAM in the smaller storage G stylus, which was just never enough. Here are the Geekbench scores, so you can compare some numbers with whatever phone you currently have. Obviously, this is still not a flagship spec smartphone performance-wise, it's a mid-tier device, but with Android 14 out of the box, more RAM, and still a name brand and plenty powerful processor to boot, I think this year's G stylus still offers enough potential processing power to please most people. If you want an over-the-top powerhouse device, get a used Samsung Ultra or a Note device, but if you use your phone for the regular basic stuff throughout the day, this thing is going to handle most everything you throw at it, just so long as you like Motorola's Android experience too. The only real drawback with this phone, of course, is the long-term software support or lack thereof. It really isn't going to be more than maybe one major Android upgrade in this phone's lifetime. But I still see people in the comments telling me they don't care about that. I just sort of wish Motorola cared. I mean, they keep pledging sustainability, but their smartphones feel disposable if they stop updating or optimizing them after only a year. That's just how I feel. You may feel differently. Regardless of all that, this is a phone that I think is going to fare perfectly well for most people performance-wise, and while we didn't get a processor bump, the overall specs are something I just can't complain about. What I will complain about, even though it'll fall on deaf ears, is Motorola's continued reluctance to include a charger. This new stylus supports 30-watt fast charging speeds, a bump up from last year, and they should be advertising that and giving you the brick to support that, but sadly, they don't. And I doubt some people will ever realize or even utilize the fast speeds. There's also 15-watt wireless charging for this phone, another new feature, and you still have the big 5,000 milliamp battery inside. So power and charging features here really are top tier for a mid-range phone, but I feel like a good chunk of people won't be fully utilizing them. Finally, when it comes to the cameras, Motorola actually gave this phone the well-rounded setup it deserves. The main lens is a seemingly new 50 megapixel f1.8 aperture, and the secondary lens is actually this combination 13 megapixel 120 degree ultra wide / macro. It does both. The selfie camera gets double the megapixels as last year. It's a 32 megapixel lens, and within the camera app, you get your usual array of Moto specific add-ons and solid camera modes that certainly elevate this setup beyond a budget camera, but still doesn't quite reach flagship level. The combo ultra wide angle / macro up close lens is great. I've been begging for an ultra wide lens on these Moto Gs, and I think everyone will appreciate that now. There's video recording up to 4K 30 FPS. There's a high megapixel picture mode alongside night mode, pro controls, dual capture, time lapse, and other fun options, and a couple of quick sample shots I snapped here out of the box look pretty good. There's still the oddly overprocessed Moto looking pictures we're used to seeing, but they're slightly more natural with their skin tone. The detail looks real instead of artificial, and I'm actually excited to test out these cameras in the coming weeks because I think this is a great overall setup for this particular phone. So if you need me, I'll be shouting from the rooftops that the 2024 Moto G Stylus is not just the best G Stylus ever released, but probably the best US Motorola device the company has ever offered. This is a $400 phone that you certainly won't pay $400 for, but it delivers upgrades and changes that have been long overdue. Like an OLED screen, finally, like a modern, premium, and unique design and build, like the decent performance specs and double the RAM, and the camera setup that finally has it all. Every single person who has a Moto G device from the last few years should be upgrading to this one for 2024. Please, for the sake of the Moto G line, to show Motorola they finally did something right and give yourself a phone that's great. The 2024 Moto G Stylus seems to be an absolute must-buy this year, but what do you guys think? Am I being ridiculous? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.